It's been pointed out that in Tennessee I was not searching the woods for fungus, and also that this year is really a good year for saprophytic fungus because of how it's just rained, and it's probably going to be a really pretty year for the trees too, because it rained hard and long. I mean, not super hard, so it knocked all the leaves off, while the leaves are still mostly green. So the trees have gotten a really good drink. They're not going to drop their leaves early. They're going to probably get some really good color. And that tincture lasts a very long time, and that it might be many years. It might be next year. It might be many years before there's a crop of turkey tail like this and other trematase and stuff. And I think the reason why I'm hearing this stuff better is because I'm eating the mushrooms. And it's not that they're psychedelic or anything, it's just that, they're doing all sorts of weird stuff in my body. I don't even want to say some of the stuff I've noticed. Definitely medicinal. Yeah. And nothing weird, just kind of kinky. Anyway, so, yeah, where was I going? Oh, my son. We need to correct the timeline a little bit, because, the whole Pima Detsu name, that's, I may have lived 1,000 years unfocused before Dad found a society that would at least bullshit him enough to say that he could bring his family forth there. So that is the first time the concept of having a name came into my awareness. So our timeline is actually more than 2,000 years. Around the time of the fall of Carthage. And so after Alexander and before Jesus-ish. And what all has happened, I don't know. But there were occasional, that with Frogman, scraping off the eggs so I could stay small, and so that my grandmother wouldn't know that she'd been fully hooked up for a long time. So maybe that went for 2,000 years before she started to realize she'd been hooked up. And so my son out in the Altai Mountains had a child who came to the U.S. in 1626, and he told a bunch of stories based on our beliefs about what he was doing here, but we have other stories for what he was really doing. He was making himself rich, but he always knew. His father taught him very well about what was the right thing to do, but he only memorized the text and knew how to behave when people were watching. And those are genes that he imparted on people around here. But he also had his father's genes and his grandmother's genes and his grandfather's genes. And so sometimes those would express around here too. And some of those would be his biggest fan club. And so at a certain point, because of my father's methods, he has had to say at certain times that people couldn't condemn anyone unless they had proof of things. because sometimes you have to walk around weird ways, and the goal isn't always obvious. But eventually, we were able to do inventory, some things that none of us have, in theory we thought that maybe we would, but in all these thousands of years none of us ever have. And so then we were able to change some status of people and things. And so I think this son and Azrael have been taking turns holding people to certain debts and promises. And so people would see certain behaviors one way, and I would see other things, and there would be a lot of stuff that didn't need to enter my consciousness. And then the witches would be mad about that, and then they would make these things enter my consciousness. But I was given a lot of things for processing this information. So it's kind of part of what I'm going through right now. So what's real and what's not real? What's the result? What is more powerful and what is not? And why do things persist the way they do for time, and then it seems like through no effort of your own it's done. And people can work very hard, and yet everything fall apart. So these are just recurring themes in reality, and mushrooms are good, and it's easier to learn the set of mushrooms that will kill you than it is to learn the set of mushrooms you can use for things.